What exactly is useRef? What is the difference between useState and useRef? When should you use useRef? These are the frequently asked questions when it comes to useRef standard hooks. Hey, this is Tapas. Welcome you to another video from the React series. So today we are going to discuss all about useRef, when to use, how to use with a lot of code examples. If you're new to this series, don't forget to check out the previous videos from this series. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Alright, without any further delay, let's get down to business. One of the reasons that we find useRef a bit difficult because we miss out to understand useRef with the difference with other existing hook. Also, we don't focus much on what is the real existence, what is the real usages of this particular hook than just getting into the syntax of it. So in this video, we'll be discussing more about the differences of useRef with other hooks, what is the exact usage of it, where it should be used, should not be used. But of course, we'll get started with the syntax. But while doing that, we'll break the syntax into multiple parts. The syntax looks like this. Const ref equals to useRef, then the initial value. So the first thing that we want to focus about useRef. useRef is a built-in hook that helps to persist values between renders, but doesn't re-render the component by any chance. What exactly this statement is? I know it's complex. Let's break that statement into multiple pieces. useRef is a built-in hook. It means the hook is provided by React. We have not created this hook. And it actually returns something that we can persist between the component renders. It means that there is a value that will be returning, and that value will be persisted or saved in component's entire life cycle. In between how many ever renders that component happen, we should be able to get this value. We should be able to use this value. Okay, so that's the second point. And the last point about this definition is, if we update that value that useRef returns, the component is not going to get re-rendered. But if the components get re-rendered by any other cause, for example, a state update happened, the reference value get persisted between those renders. That's as simple as that. The next thing is about the argument that we pass, which is like an initial value. useRef accepts an optional argument. It can be of any valid JavaScript value that set the initial value for the reference that it returns. What exactly that value? So the value that it returns is nothing but a plain JavaScript object. What exactly JavaScript object? That is enclosed with a curly braces, having a key value pair. Key and values are separated with a colon symbol. And in this case, the value, the object that useRef returns, it has a very special property called current. C-U-R-R-E-N-T. Current. Okay. And the final thing is the const that we all know is a JavaScript keyword to declare constant variables. So you are with me? You're good with me so far? That's great. But one thing that I want to highlight over here, it is not enough to know about it. So what we'll be doing now, we are going to focus on a few key points. The key points that you must know to understand useRef much better way. So the definition that we have seen so far, we'll be breaking them further into these key points. Okay, so let's do that. The first point that we are going to talk about, useRef returns an object with a special property called current. Just now we spoke about it. So what does it mean? The moment we do const ref equals to useRef 0, you can think about it. The ref variable is something like this. Const ref equals to an object having a current as a property key name and as a value is 0 because we have initialized useRef with 0. Had we initialized useRef with hello world, the current would have had a value called hello world. Okay, so far great. So ref.count is 0. Now if I want to update the current value, I'll be doing ref.current equals to something, maybe hello world, true, ref.current equals to abcd, whatever I want. Now once I make this updating this reference, it doesn't cause a re-render of the component. We have to remember this particular rule. Okay, and that is where its usage also come into picture. We'll see that. And the final thing is, the reference value, the ref.current value will be persisted between renders. These 3 points that we have to keep it in mind. Now, while we are thinking about 3 points, I know that what might come in your mind, that am I talking about something like a useState, but exactly not like that? Maybe I'm talking about something like that, but one final thing that you have to remember, in case of useState, if the state value changes, it causes a re-rendering of the component. So it means the component will be re-rendered. But in case of useRef, if the reference value changes, the ref.current value changes, it is not going to cause a re-rendering. This is a very tricky interview questions as well that you need to keep in mind, and you need to find this difference. There are a few other differences that we'll be actually talking about, and those differences we'll be learning while seeing the hands-on coding. So let's get into the coding and try to figure out what useRef is for and where it should not be used. Okay, let's get into that. So we'll get started with a very simple example of a counter. The counter component has a state variable called count and a way to update the count, and we are updating the count when someone click on this button. The handle click function gets called, it incrementing the count by 1 every time we click on it, and we're showing the count over here. That's the result. When I click on this, I see this count is getting incremented. Now in this particular example, what is happening, we are actually having a state variable, and whenever the state variable gets changed over here, the component re-renders, and because of the re-rendering, this count is also gets updated. Now let's say if we want to, with this particular philosophy, with the state variable updates, we want to kind of see like how many times our application, basically our component, gets re-rendered, how many times components get rendered, and we want to use the useState and the useEffect hook to find out. One way that we can write this code is like this. So again the counter, but in this case we have a useEffect. You know that useEffect is for the side effect, and in the useEffect we are actually now, instead of a button, in the useEffect we are actually incrementing the count and we are printing the same count. Now there is a problem with this code. The moment I save it, you will see the problem happening over here. The problem is like, in the every time the useEffect runs, we are actually incrementing the count, which is going to change this count variable. Count is a state variable. That means component will re-render. Whenever the component re-rendering is finishes, the useEffect will be called again. So again, component is what exactly happening. Count will try to set to a new value. Again, count is setting to a new value, means again re-rendering happen. Again, the useEffect will call. So this will get into a kind of infinite loop altogether, which will cause a problem in our application. As you see, the re-rendering is happening, and it is happening. This is just keep incrementing the count stuff, and also in the console you see that there is maximum update exists. Now this is one place where we can use useRef. Why? Because whenever we update the value of an useRef, it is not going to re-render your component. It means the problem that we are seeing with the state being used to kind of show the count, at the same time the same count we are updating as part of our side effects, which may lead to a infinite loop kind of situation. So let's use useRef and see how can we solve this particular problem. So to refactor this one, what first thing we'll do is like, we don't need useState over here. Instead of that, we'll be taking useRef from React, and as what exactly useRef returns. useRef returns object, so that object I can actually keep inside any variable. For now I'll be giving a name called say count itself, so I'll be keeping this inside the count variable. Okay, so over here, you can also name it like as a convention, like if it is a reference, you can name it like count ref, things like this. So that is much better way of telling that this is a reference. Now in the same useEffect, instead of set count, what we can do simply is like, I have a count ref, so count ref dot current. So remember that this is an object which is having a special property called current. So again, count ref dot current plus 1. I'm incrementing it by 1. Then the final thing that I can take is like, I can do this count ref dot current, and I can actually print it over here. Now see the difference over here. Once I refresh, what happens? It just print the value 0, the value that I have initialized with. Nothing exactly happened. Why? Because this reference that we get from the useRef, though we are updating it, it is not going to trigger a re-rendering of the component. As it is not triggering a re-rendering of the component, there is no way useEffect will be called again. So when this got initialized, but it is never ever getting incremented, because useRef is not going to get called, because useRef will be called only when the first render happens. After the first render, useEffect will see what to whether there are any kind of dependencies. Based on the dependencies, it is going to run the callback function inside useEffect, and then the things will take place. So in this case, it will not going to do anything. But we are going to use this reference to print the rendering of this component, right? So For that purpose, what we will do, we are going to now include something, a side effect, which is like going to re-render this component. Now for that purpose, let me just go ahead and introduce input tag. So let's see this input tag in details. It is an input type text, and it is having a value. We'll be defining this value in a while. And on change means whenever I'm typing into the input box, I am going to set some value to a variable, right? So this is what I'm going to do. So for that, I'm going to take, say, a state variable, useState, and with the useState, what I will be doing, I'll be defining this search term. So let's define this search term, const search term, and then a method to update this search term. So I have the set search term, and then I'll be using useState, just initializing with something like an empty string. So what I'm doing over here, what I'm saying is like just for the demonstration purpose, that I have a text box, and as and when I'm typing something on the text box, I am actually updating this state variable called search term, because on change I'm calling set search term. Okay, and whenever I'm updating this state variable, the moment I update this state variable, please try to understand this. This is what the power of React lies. Whenever I'm updating the state variable, the moment I do this, the re-rendering happens. It means the code from here to here gets run. The moment the re-rendering happens, our use effect gets called. It's a side effect. The moment use effect gets called, what I get to see over here is like countRef.current value gets incremented by 1, and this re-render and countRef.current value will be printed the latest value. So now I will be, the moment I save this, I am going to see a text box appearing over here, and as and when I am typing, I will be changing the state variable, and once the state variable gets changed, I am going to see this current value getting updated. So let's type something. So I type, say, A. The moment I type A, what happened is like this got triggered, state variable got updated. So it will incur the re-render, use effect will be called, current value incremented by 1. So countRef.current now will be 1. So if I type something more, as many characters I am typing, I am re-rendering this component that many times, and that is what I am going to print with the countRef.current value. So this is one way to tell like how my state variable and the references are different. The state variable is something that causes the re-rendering. The reference doesn't cause the re-rendering. We have seen that. Now we are actually getting the updated value of the reference with a re-render from another state variable. So in your programming, you might have a need sometime that you don't want to use any kind of references in the re-rendering part directly, but in your use effect might be you want to kind of get certain variables temporarily, or kind of want to preserve that variables temporarily over the renders. That is why you will be using useRef. One of the difference between your useRef and a regular variable, so instead of doing this const count equals to useRef, how about doing this 0, just like this. So the problem with this one would be is like whenever the re-rendering will happen, the countRef will be again initialized with 0. So it means that across re-rendering, this particular variable value won't be preserved. But if we are coming back with useRef, the value will be preserved. That's why we are able to see in every render this value coming from 10 to 11 to 12 to 13. If it is a mere usual variables, it will be always 0 whenever the re-rendering happening. Okay, so that's a good lesson. So with that understanding, we are now going to see one more example. So in this example, what we'll be doing is like we'll see like how useRef hook is going to help us with the DOM manipulation. Oh, hold on. Some videos back, we told like in React, you won't be doing DOM manipulation directly. Yes, that's true. React is declarative, and we just tell React what to be done, and React get it done for ourselves, especially the DOM manipulation and things like that. But there could be some situations where you want to take a control and want to do it by yourself. One of the situation is putting a focus into a text box, or maybe doing something with the hide of a div, or some kind of fixes that is not very straightforward, where you have to rely on accessing the DOM variable directly by yourself. Only on those cases, only on those circumstances, you will be using this useRef. Otherwise, leave it to React to do its job by itself. So let us see one example, right over here. So in this component, I have a focus component, which is just having one input type text box. And whenever the component renders, I am seeing that there is no focus into this particular text box. So if I put a focus forcefully and then refresh this component, once the refresh happens and comes back, I see the focus is getting lost. Now, how can I bring back the focus? So for that reason, I can use useRef. This is a very, very popular use of useRef hook. So for that, the first thing that I'll be doing over here is I'll be first import, useRef from React. So that's the first thing that I am going to do. And once that is over, then I'll be taking this useRef. Let's take like say const, give a name, input lmref equals to useRef. Just put it blank for now. So I have now created a reference. Now this reference, what I'm going to do, the first thing, this reference I am going to use in the ref attribute of the input text. Now in React, all these HTML elements like input, div, p, etc. gets a very special attribute called ref. Using that, you can actually associate this useRef object's output, the useRef hook's output, this particular object over here. So it means now the ref attribute has the most updated value that you get from the useRef hook. Okay, so that is a very practical use. Okay, just use that. It's a small, it's a capital letter. All right. So we have now tied this input type text box with the useRef hook using the ref attribute. Okay, so that is quite good thing to kind of remember. Okay, so there's one more problem is like it should not be like a string, rather it should be like an expression because it returns an object. So it should be like an expression, it should not be like a string. Okay, so this is what it is done. Now the next thing is like, now if I make any changes on this guy, on the input element ref, it is directly going to impact this particular input element. How? Let us do that. So what we'll be doing along with useRef, we'll be also importing something called useEffect. Okay, so we'll be doing is as part of the side effect. So useEffect, and then it takes a callback, and then after the callback, what we'll be doing is we'll be running it for the first time. So we're doing an empty array as a dependency. So input ref element is a return value from useRef. That means it has a special property called current. Now, whenever we do this input ref lm dot current, it means that I am getting this input type. I am getting this input type text box, this particular DOM element. Now, on top of that, what I can simply do, I can call any of the DOM methods, available methods. For example, focus is the method to bring focus on the text box. So that is what I can do. Now I save this particular code. What I'll be expecting is like, if I refresh the screen and the focus back, I should be able to get this focus back on the text box. Okay. So I refreshed it and you could see the focus is there in the text box. So any kind of DOM manipulation you can do. For example, you can take this input ref dot current. This is just I'm showing for the demo purpose. Please don't do it in real life. I can access all the style variables like that, and I can put the say background color equals to something like yellow. Okay. So if I save it now, I will be able to see the background color of the text box has been changed to yellow as long as I put the correct spelling. Here you go. Okay. So you will have the cursor along with the background is yellow. You see that? Yeah. So it means that any kind of DOM manipulation if you want, you'll be able to do. Now the last thing that I want to call out about useRef is you might want to have a some kind of references created, and based on that reference, if you think that your use effect can be controlled, that is a wrong assumption. What I mean by that, I have shown in the previous videos, like if you have a state variable or a props that coming to a component, based on the state or props, you can actually pass over here as a dependency, and based on those dependency changes, you can run your side effect, right? That is a pure core part of the use effect. If you are seeing it first time, please go through the previous use effect video. Now, instead of the state and props, if there is a situation you think that based on you as a reference value, you want to control your side effect, you won't be able to do. So your use effect callback, use effect side effect cannot be controlled using a reference. Use effect callback can only be controlled using a state or a props. That's something that you need to keep in mind, because sometimes you might see certain code or by mistake you have done something and things are not, use effect is not running. One of the cause could be that instead of a state or props over here as a dependency, you pass a reference, because reference has nothing to do with the re-rendering of your component. It doesn't have any impact on your use effect. So please remember that particular statement well. So we are kind of done with this particular video. Just quickly recap things for us. useRef is a built-in hook, and this particular built-in hook, what it does, it basically returns a reference to us. Reference is nothing but a very plain JavaScript object having a special key called current. We can update the value of the current, but whenever we update, the component never gets re-rendered. Whenever the components gets re-rendered, the value of that current variable get persisted. It never get lost in the component lifecycle. Unlike state, the component will never re-render when you update the hook, this particular references. Now, another thing is like a real usage of it is like for the DOM manipulation, one use that we have seen, and probably a usage where you don't want to create the state variable unnecessarily, because it has nothing to do with the re-rendering. Maybe in the use effect, in case of use effects, there are certain kind of dependencies that you are managing in the use effect, certain kind of variables you want to kind of persist across the rendering. Those are the cases you will be kind of emphasizing on using the useRef hook over the useState. The moment you use useState and the state used in the rendering, you know that things will re-render. Now, if you use a state variable without of its use in the rendering, I don't think there is a very practical use of a state variable. Use a state variable only when the state variable can be used in the rendering. It has a direct relationship with the rendering. But if you don't have that, but yet want to preserve the value of a variable across multiple renders, that is only when use a useRef loop. That is the particular thing that you need to keep in mind. Another thing that I want to call out is like, updating a particular state, like using the set state, it's an asynchronous operation. It means that, your state variable updates only after your component re-rendering happens, right? That is how the setting a state is an asynchronous operation. But setting a reference is pretty much synchronous, right? So it happens then and there only, and you should be able to see that effect then and there only. It doesn't need any kind of re-rendering. So I hope the differences between a state and the reference is quite clear after watching this video, and you will be able to make use of useRef quite well, in future. So make sure that you practice this one pretty well, and I hope that you actually have things clear. In case you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, over Twitter or in the comment section of this video. I'll respond with that. All right. Hey, so did you find it useful? If so, please let me know in the comment section, and like this video, subscribe to this channel, and if possible, share this series, into your circle so that more and more people come to know about it. In the upcoming video, we are going to talk about higher order components, another useful information that you need to know, at least in the interviews and all other aspects it is important. So stay tuned for the next video very soon. Thank you.